welcome everybody to our first ever podcast. Oh, sorry. See, now you got me messed up. All right. Welcome everybody to the first ever YouTube series called Not Another Demo. So what are we trying to accomplish with this, Matt?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about wanting to change the narrative between vendors and companies, customers, clients, whatever word you want to use, and make it, cut through some of the noise, cut through some of the marketing, get right to the point, make this a very personal, human conversation about how some of these vendors are able to help.
Excellent. And today's guest, who do we have as our first official, dare I say, guinea pig?
Yes.
Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Mike Drummond. I'm with a company called Extrahop, and we do network detection and response. We're a cybersecurity company, and I'm looking forward to working with Matt, Aaron, and Lloyd on the inaugural Not a Demo presentation or podcast, or whatever you guys call it.
Whatever it is.
It's going to be everything. It'll be the end all be all.
Yes.
Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Matt Nelson, president of the West Michigan chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance.
Excellent. Mr. Lloyd.
My name's Lloyd Guyett, and I am on the board here for CSA West Michigan.
Excellent. And my name is Aaron Bragg. I am the Director of Professional Outreach for Cloud Security Alliance. Doesn't that sound so official, Matt? I'm also the Cloud Security Alliance Jazz DJ. And then finally, my day job, my real job when I'm not doing things on my lunchtime is I'm a lead information security analyst for a major healthcare system here in West Michigan. Michael, we want to talk about Extrahop and why this shouldn't be just not another demo, but what makes your company so interesting for people in West Michigan.
Awesome. Thanks, gentlemen. So what I'd like to go through today is just kind of talking about, not necessarily exclusively Extrahop, but I think Extrahop has a huge value from a security perspective. But I'm going to talk about why Extrahop, right? So we'll go through and do just that. So what I intend to accomplish today is talk about NDR, network detection and response, right? So detecting threats and responding to threats, right? And I think that's ultimately why we're all here, right? So, and I'll show the unique perspective that the Extrahop has with this. And the first thing I'm actually going to go through is what we call the Security Triad, and which includes network detection and response, endpoint detection and response, something such as like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, SentinelOne, something of that nature, and then how we can stitch all that data together in the SIM and really get a better understanding of what's going on, like full kill chain approach, right? All the way from there's a nefarious email coming in all the way to exfiltration. So I'd like to talk about that, right? And then
the Security Triad, that's something new-ish from Gartner, right? This is a newer thing.
I gotta say, this is the first time I've ever heard of it.
Is it really?
Oh, but yeah. I missed. Yeah. There was no Gartner Data Analytics Conference. Yeah, I'm still bummed about that. So what's the Triad?
Yeah, the Triad.
What new marketing jargon? Sorry, jargon has the all-wise Gartner come up with?
So and then Michael, I don't know if you've got a slide that shows it, but it's basically a triangle of network detection and response, endpoint detection and response, and then SIM technology to pull all of that stuff together. And what Gartner is saying is that those three things together is really going to capture all of the information that you need from a security standpoint.
Okay. All right, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and then I just want to say one more thing before I get into the Security Triad, and then I'm going to kind of try to stitch it all together and talk about the hybrid cloud, right? So one of the things that we were talking about before we got into the actual podcast or webcast or whatever we're calling it was we're talking about hybrid and how in specifically Michigan, because that's where most of us who are on this call is working out of. It is a hybrid cloud, right? So if you go out west and whatnot, and to like some of these larger Silicon Valley companies, they're exclusively cloud, right? So that's a different discussion than I'm having personally in Michigan here, right? We're finding a lot of organizations are moving their workloads to the cloud for different things, and the current environment with the pandemic, that's been accelerated, right? Even here in Michigan, it's being accelerated that these workloads are moving to the cloud. So we'll talk about how we can take that level of visibility that we have with the triad that we're going to be talking about initially, how we can apply that to the hybrid cloud also. So I think that in my mind, that's a good discussion, and hopefully everyone gets a little bit of value out of it, right? So
excellent. Maybe a couple quick beginning questions.
Good.
So obviously you talked a little bit about the move to the cloud and the pandemic accelerating certain things. And I know that we've personally seen it because those of us in healthcare have had to embrace what leadership is calling accelerated virtual healthcare. So things that were just, ideas in our architects and our digital leadership and even clinical leadership they were just thoughts, like even 6 months ago, are now in the forefront. They're being implemented. They're being implemented at an incredibly fast pace. And we're really, healthcare security is really having to do a delicate balance of moving faster than we're used to and still trying to maintain some security guardrails. So this is really interesting product that I want to learn a little bit about more, because remote virtual healthcare, it's not going away. It's here, and it's only going to expand.
Exactly. So let me share out my screen and let's get into more details with that, Aaron. Sound good?
Yes.
Let me see here. So I'm going to share. See here. Let me see.
As long as Matt's not hogging the screen. Last time we tried to do a screen share, Matt had it locked out.
That's a better feel about it.
Play from current slide. Oh my goodness, this is actually going to work. Let's see here. So share.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Number 2. Can you guys see? Which screen are you seeing? Okay.
NDR is the signal and the noise.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. First time, guys. maybe we should get a job in IT, right?
It is the slide presenter view, though, if you want to swap displays. So.
Okay. Let's see here. Let me swap displays here. So let me share. Desktop 2. Share.
Now, is that while you're doing fixing the technical difficulties? Is that the triad?
This is the triad. This is the triad. It's ultimately I maybe it started as a marketing type of architecture or whatever, but I think that there's
I love
I like that term. It's great.
I love it. Markitecture.
That's right. So it may have started as that, but ultimately when I saw it, it made a lot of sense to me personally, because I did come from the EDR space before I went to Extrahop. I was at one of the major EDR vendors, and now that I'm at Extrahop with the NDR, I really, one of the reasons I went to the NDR space is because it was a new space, and I felt that there was stuff that we were missing with EDR. I mean, EDR is a fantastic solution if I want to understand what processes are being run, or the initial attack point, right? So let's talk about EDR and how it plays into the NDR, and then how we can actually aggregate the data in the SIEM, right? So let me just paint a visual picture for everyone, right? So let's imagine that we get an email, right, from whoever or whomever, spear phishing email. Some real complex attacker sends us did some great social engineering, and they gave us this email that we clicked on, right? And I've seen, I've been in organizations, everyone from like above average people fall for spear phishing. We all know this, right? Doctors, lawyers, heads of security.
That's why it's spear phishing, not just phishing, right?
Not just phishing.
It's targeted, right?
Targeted, right? So it happens, right? So imagine this. So imagine we get this great email. We click on it. It's a PDF, and we leverage a vulnerability within Acrobat to then, do whatever we need to do on the machine, right, as an attacker, right? So if that's ransomware or if that's data exfiltration, whatever it may be. But in this scenario, let's just assume it was data exfiltration, right? So the EDR is going to do a fantastic job of seeing that there was something that executed from Adobe, right? Then what what happened with from that is that Adobe then leveraged like something like laying on the land or living off the land or whatever that may be. So then all of a sudden they're leveraging PowerShell, right? And it's going in using Mimikatz and whatever, and then getting into LSAS and doing all these different things, right, on the endpoint that we would expect as an attacker. But what from EDR perspective, we get that great picture, but the picture kind of ends at that point, right? So what the NDR will do is we will see the exfiltration, right? So what IP address did this go to? Where did it go? If there's like a data exfiltration with something like, let's say, a database, like what was the dump from the database? We wouldn't see that with the EDR, but we will see that with the NDR. And then if you look at the SIM, that will be aggregated into the SIM or orchestration tool. So we can automate the response or look at it from the SIM, and then we're able to see a complete picture, right? So one of the ways that I would refer to it is like the kill chain. We can see the entire chain of what occurred during the attack. And I really feel that from leveraging the NDR along with the EDR, it gives us a very clean picture into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we got a quick question. So in this new triad setup, and you talk about the kill chain, where along this can we start being proactive and picking out when we want to stop malicious activity? Because one of the problems that I had with certain products, we won't name the vendor, but as far as like visibility and detection, is they didn't have the means to do anything about it, right? So not only from a CASB point of view, but I know I won't get Lloyd started on data loss protection. Alerting is all fine and dandy, and maybe cleanup is great, but as we're moving more medical devices to remote environments, non-clinical settings, we're going to need to take action if we see something happening. So where in this cycle do you see that happening? And, can your product help, or is it going to have to be partnered with a different project, with a different solution? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll jump in here real quick because Michael and I were having this some of this conversation yesterday, and why I think having this be conversational is so much better is that we talked about how all of this without some orchestration and automation attached to it, there still isn't much value there. So if we're collecting logs from the network, if we're collecting information from the endpoint and we're sending it all to a SIM and it's just sitting there, we're still not at a very good point there, right? There still has to be some automation built into all of this.
That's exactly right. So ultimately, and you understand that like things slip through. Like the best approach would be at the EDR, if all of a sudden the EDR or vendor saw something that happened, it would just stop it immediately, right? Like as soon as the Adobe tried to run a child process, stop it right there. That would be the ultimate, right? And
which we want to get to.
That's exactly what you want to get to.
There are a lot of vendors out there listening to this. We need to get to that point. Sorry,
we need. I'll be quiet. But as everybody on this, who we're talking to right now, understand that's not the case, right? So what happens is, like with our NDR, right? We have obviously we have machine learning and all this. These different aspects to actually show detections and whatnot. So if we do have the detection, which it will, let's think about like an exfiltration, right? So we have somebody doing a select star from a database. We'll get an immediate alert from the NDR solution, the Extrahop solution, and then just going back to Matt's point is we could do it through the orchestration, right? To automate, then go out to whatever it may be. Go to the EDR vendor to quarantine this device. Go to some other type of a solution to quarantine that device directly from the NDR, right? So that would be another way that Extrahop could help facilitate that.
So let's talk about the workflow for a minute. So if I'm understanding it correctly,
yeah.
So the new remote medical devices, the data flow is going to be similar to like Apple Watch right here. So now you have a personal device that you want to share information with your doctor. Right. So you're going to use Google's API. You're going to use Apple's Health Kit. You're going to be pushing information up to a certain places, and you're bringing it back down and over. How can this system fit in that new ecosystem to where you're not going to be, or you, when I say you, sorry, security people aren't going to be able to you can't put endpoint protection on this puppy, right? So you're going to have to inherently trust data that can't be trusted, and then we need to be able to take action on it later. So is that, where do you kind of see that flow? Where can your product help with that particular flow?
So let me just repeat back your question and make sure I understand.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so your question is your Apple Watch, right? All of a sudden we have an alert on our Apple Watch that goes to my doctor, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden my Apple Watch data, which is quasi-secure on my wrist, but as it goes to the medical provider, at that point, it may be more vulnerable. Is that what your question is?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So ultimately, that's an awesome question, Aaron. So and that's what
sorry, I try and do softball questions every once in a while, but I got real problems to solve in healthcare security, so it's kind of hard.
So like as you know, at the end here, that's network, right? So as data is transferring over the network, we are going to be able to see it. Obviously, it's a no demo, so I'm not going to pivot in to show you a demo.
That's okay.
The data as it transfers into the medical device, let's just call it Dr. Smith's Dell laptop. As soon as it transitions into that, we'll see the IP address that it came from, where it's at, and then where it went to, right? So let's say all of a sudden there was some bad guy or bad actor or whatever we want to call him or her. They want Mike Drummond's data for whatever weird reason, right? We would see the exfiltration from that doctor's device to the bad guy, right? And we'd understand who the bad guy is. And the other thing is at that point, it would send a detection to our NDR solution. And it would go into the SIM, but B, going back to the workflow we were talking about earlier with the orchestration or whatever other solution we decide to integrate into, because we can integrate into most. We have an open API, a REST API that we can integrate into, and then we can quarantine that doctor's machine, right? Which brings up a far bigger question about that is like why would we quarantine? But ultimately, exfiltration, I feel, is one of the more important pieces, right? Exfiltration or ransomware or something that's going to pivot off of that device and onto another device, we should definitely quarantine it. But let's just say all of a sudden there's a crypto miner on a specific doctor's machine. I don't think at that point we'd want to quarantine the machine. We would just want to clean it off, right? So that's a bigger discussion about how we want to do that workflow. And oh, by the way, everything within that workflow we can automate through the Extrahop solution.
Okay, so that brings up a good point, because in healthcare, you have situations to where you actually bring vendor equipment on site, right? So not all the equipment that we have in the hospital is owned by that healthcare system. Right. So Lloyd dealt with this, firsthand in facilities. Like you have to, and I'll be quiet for a minute and let Lloyd talk to it, but you now have, healthcare owned equipment and you have vendor equipment, and that vendor equipment can have its own ecosystem and OS. Lloyd, do you want to talk about that? Because that plays into why you can't just go in and just image reset something for, you can't have your client services team come in and just wipe it out. You may need forensics information and other stuff. Let me be quiet for a minute and defer to Lloyd.
So some of the things I've run into, it's not just vendor devices, but it's also patient-owned devices. There are things like, in endocrinology, if you've got diabetes and you need pumps and meters and those types of things, those devices can be very difficult. There's a wide range of configurations. Some have good security, some have none at all. So when you start looking at those, each, healthcare isn't just the hospital. It's also all of your ambulatory. It's all of your outpatient clinics. It's all of like your medical group. And every one of those becomes like its micro ecosystem of solutions. Neurology doesn't need what cardiology does, doesn't need what radiology does. So you end up with a mix of vendor devices and patient-owned devices that, can really enable some cool patient care capabilities, but trying to secure all those and manage that ecosystem becomes very challenging. And as you like when I was facilities project manager for IS, trying to build out that infrastructure in a way that's secure, but still enables the business for what they want to accomplish can become quite a challenge without technology such as this to keep track of that north, south, east, west behavior.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. And one of the things that I guess what kind of sets apart, or just this technology apart from, an EDR or anything that would require an agent, is just as long as we have that network traffic going into Extrahop. That could be network traffic from the traffic from the cloud. That could be the traffic from the endpoint. That could be the traffic from the vendor device. No matter where that's coming from, we can actually view that data and understand that data and act upon that data, regardless where it's coming from because of that.
Yeah, I think some of the research that I've done into the NDR space and Extrahop is, you can spoof accounts, you can spoof email, you can spoof a lot of things, but those packets don't lie, right? So
Sounds like you could do an old Detroit Pistons reference. What was it? Rasheed Wallace, the ball don't lie. Packets don't lie.
Yeah, and that's a really awesome point, and that's one of those things. And this is not to disparage anything. It's just to say that the packet, the wired data cannot be manipulated, right? Where logs could potentially be manipulated. Endpoint security can be turned off. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, but you can't get rid of the packets.
So I'm gonna propose something here, and okay. I'm just trying to take use cases and then put them against the technology to see where stuff could fit. Okay. So if absolutely. I'm understanding your product right, a value add for this would be, let's say, because obviously I can't control the data exchange from my Apple Watch to Apple. No. That being said, that information has got to go from HomeKit or HealthKit to other places. Is that where a product like yours could work an advantage? Can I put this in front of like Human API or Valedict API, those healthcare APIs to make sure it's coming from where it says it's coming from? Am I understanding that right?
I think that's a fair statement. So let me just repeat back what I think you're saying. So again, we'll go back to Dr. Smith's laptop, right? Or Dr. Smith's office machine that actually views the data that came from Apple, right? Mm-hmm. So your question is the data on this machine, did this data come from Apple, right?
Or whatever healthcare API you're using, right? Like I want to make sure that, to your point, like looking at the package, like this data is authentic. While I can't protect this, at least I can get, the I in the CIA triangle. At least I can know that the data is real and hasn't been manipulated.
Yeah, Aaron, that's one of the things that you asked that question, and almost every POC that I do, we do just that, right? I create a dashboard that shows that, the data going in or out of this specific device is the data that we expect, right? So we can put in, a subnet, machine names, stuff of that nature to understand that, okay, what we see here is actually correct, right? But what would be more interesting is the correct data. Okay, fine. What would be better is to have a dashboard or an alert or something to say that, okay, this data did not come from where we expect, right? And then alert you upon that instead of showing you everything that you expect. Let's show you what you don't expect. Is that fair?
Right. Because like I said, again, in a perfect world, I want to know that, you know, wow, I'm brain fading. Sorry.
That's
The
okay.
integrity.
It's Friday.
I guess I need more coffee.
Yeah.
That the integrity is good, because that's going to be important when you have those remote medical devices, because I'm going to be mostly concerned about two things going forward in 2020, 2021 with remote virtual care. I need to make sure that the data transport is secure, and I need to make sure that my third-party interactions are safe. So the data transport and the integrity, I just need to, hey, we're getting Zoom bombed.
That's okay.
I need those to just work. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
that's the business part of it. I need that security to be transparent, and I need it to just work, right? Like as a former developer and a techie person, I probably could do more with an Android device, but I have an Apple device because I just need it to work. I need to think and concentrate on other more important things. So taking that same, you know, thought process, I want to ensure that the transport is secure and that data integrity is huge, so that I, as a security person, can really beat up that third party vendor and making sure that they're doing everything that they need to do to ensure that the whole data pipeline is protected.
Exactly. And hopefully I did an adequate job on explaining that.
Yeah. I mean, it really does, because it's a security blanket, no pun intended. I mean, I need to, like I said, I need to understand how that data is protected in transit, and so that I can concentrate on other stuff.
Like your daughter.
Star of the show. Star of the show.
Star of the show, yeah.
So, okay. Give me a second. I'll kick it over to Lloyd.
Oh yeah, no, I don't really have much to add there. I think that was covered pretty well. So if we want to keep moving forward here, that'd be great.
Yeah, Michael, Jeff, what else you got for us?
Well, so you know what? We're 27 minutes in, Matt.
We're good.
Right.
It's been great. So let's just
this is good.
It's interesting. I didn't expect for this to be a whole half hour, just the SIM EDR discussion, but NDR solution. But I think it's a healthy discussion to have, right? And just to understand, I think that this architecture diagram really explains what we do and what we don't do, right?
But I think what's great about it, and what I'm already seeing as far as where we take this video series, is that having this as a conversation and not just another demo is taking what would probably be a 30-second slide that no one would pay attention to and skip right past, and turning it into a valuable half an hour discussion. So I think I love the conversation that we're having here.
Well, that's one of the things that I think about, me personally, Mike Drummond, not Mike Drummond from Extrahop, is like whenever I have other vendors come to me and talk to me, and they're like, they go through and they just do their show up and throw up, and they do their slide deck. After about 30 minutes, I'm about to fall asleep, right? But if I sit and I sit and I watch or listen to like a Joe Rogan podcast or like Darknet Diaries, or something that's interesting to me, it's more of a compelling way for me to learn and be entertained in what's going on, right? So that's kind of what I think you and I are on the same page there, Matt.
The conversation and the relationships aspect is something that has been desperately missing out of this entire security world for a very long time. So
right.
The black box of security, or the fog of security, as it is.
That's right.
So Michael, did you have another slide, or I think you had mentioned earlier, was there something else that you wanted to show?
Well,
we got a few.
It's just the one other thing that we talked about, right? Which is regardless of where the data is coming from, we have the same level of visibility, right? So if it's, in the cloud, if it's on-prem, if it's a remote users and IoT. And let me just talk about this for one quick second. Is as this pandemic started, and like a lot of the user base went from working in the office to working out of their house. It caused a visibility issue and a security issue. So one of the things that we've done is we're able to categorize data, right? And we would actually create a group for VPN traffic, and we had visibility into the VPN traffic regardless if they're on-prem, at their home, where they're at. If they're logged into the VPN, we still have visibility into their traffic, and we can still understand any type of events that are occurring on, latency, stuff of that nature. So that's one of the things that I really feel at Extrahop we've been super effective with, is being able to see remote users, info, which is a new world for everyone, right? So I feel that we did a really nice job with that. And
they've even got an Apple Watch on their little graphic there for you.
Yeah, they do.
The stuff, and we were talking about this the other day, Michael, that I think is also interesting. And you mentioned earlier how we're, West Michigan tends to be a hybrid area. I think where you have, Google, AWS, and Azure there together, I think we're also a Google, a hybrid cloud type situation primarily, right? I mean, you might be a company that decides to be a Google shop or decides to focus on having only Microsoft Azure internally, but without question, you're going to have applications or vendors, other third parties that are going to be run out of one of those other clouds. And if your security focus is only on, you say I'm a Microsoft Azure shop, and so all my security is focused on all the traffic that's going through there, but you've got some third-party apps that are running through AWS, some SaaS apps or something, you might be completely missing a whole bunch of security stuff happening in your environment just because you're not looking at it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the beauty of this is coming here in the near future is we're going to have one single pane of glass for everything, right? So we're going to be able to see the AWS, Azure, Google, VM, enter VM traffic, server traffic, and everything all within one beautiful little dashboard right here, wherever you're at.
So when you do your POCs, what are some of the common things that you catch? What are the things that the businesses, when they do their POC, they're just like, wow, holy cow, you guys just really nailed it.
Good question.
Yeah,
what are the surprise? Aha, gotcha. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
What is this thing doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Like one of them is like, we'll have it and I had a great one. A couple of really cool things, right? So one of the most basic things that we do is show new devices on the network, right? And as you can see here, we drill down protocols, right? So I was at a POC a few months ago in Ohio, not Michigan, obviously, right? But anyway, we were sitting there, and we have a dashboard that shows new devices and then, well, not a dashboard, but a group for new devices in the last 24 hours or new devices in the last 7 hours. And we saw a new DNS server come up, right? And the security team's like, whoa, what's going on here? And needless to say, then we get on the phone, call the server team, and the server team says, oh, you know what? We didn't go through the whole the right change management process for that, right? So regardless, they found a great deal of value in that, to understand that, hey, this is a DNS server that was expected to be put up, now, but this is a new Raspberry Pi or a new, Kali server or new, any other type of server. We're going to be able to understand it immediately. So that's a very basic use case, but it's a huge value, right? Another time, we, like Tor, right? So ultimately, if I'm a Chinese dissident and I need to have complete anonymity, Tor is an awesome thing, right? But if I'm in a hospital, or if I'm in a I'm an accountant at a manufacturer or whatever that may be, I don't know if running Tor internally is a good idea. So we'll actually alert upon Tor, and then the other thing is just like basic data exfiltrations, right? So putting up a 100 gig file up to Dropbox or whatever that may be, we can see all that. So there's just some of the low-hanging fruit that we'd go through from a POC perspective.
So to that point, from a POC perspective, can you talk just for a minute or two here about, what does implementation of Extrahop look like? How long does it take? If somebody has this in their environment, how many people does it require to watch over, to maintain, from a real, because that's, I think, is something that doesn't get talked about enough when companies are looking at making an acquisition of a technology, is how do I get the most out of this, and how much is it going to require me to actually use this versus just buying it?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately it depends on what the implementation is, obviously, right? So one of the things is like with the on-prem, it'll be just one or two appliances that we'll send out to the to an organization, right? They plug it in, and then one of the things I don't have, I don't want to go.
Oh, here comes the death of my PowerPoint.
No. You know what? I don't know. My elbow accidentally hit that. So no more slides, guys.
Sure.
No more slides. But so ultimately, they plug it into like a port mirroring port or span or something to that effect, and within a few minutes or so, then we're actually getting data, and we're doing discovery and classification with that, so relatively quickly. And then with the cloud, we can do it SaaS, meaning Extrahop will set it up, or through AMI to set it up. So it's relatively quick. And again, it really does it require an FTE? No, not at all, right? So it really depends on how you're going to consume the data, right? So what I'm finding personally is the smaller the organization, the more likely they are to look at the detections only. Whereas the more complex the organization, they're because we have all the data, right? Like we have every packet that goes over the network, we actually have that data. So the more complicated the environment is, the more likely they are to have a SOC, and the more likely are there to have a threat hunter. And then the threat hunters will take the data and really start to drill into it. So, I hate to answer the question where it really depends on what the organization is, but it really depends on how they're going to consume our data. But yeah, I mean, getting up and going is a relatively straightforward task. Hardly an inconvenience.
Okay.
Excellent.
And Lloyd, any final questions before we wrap up here?
No, I think this was a very valuable 30 seconds of not another demo.
I absolutely echo that. This is a great experiment, and I'm looking forward to seeing it continue. So yeah, this is good.
We'll make sure, Michael, we'll make sure that we have all your contact information and Extrahop's information up on the details of this YouTube channel. I will implore everyone to please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's the sales guy part of me, I guess, but please do that. And if you'd like to be part of one of these, let us know. We are certainly excited to continue this series on as we go along. So Michael, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you. Have a great weekend. Bye.